Hey, welcome to Sleep Crime Stories. Before we begin, let me ask, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? A quick comment and a subscribe go a long way, it really helps. Now, turn down the lights, and let's begin tonight's case. You just heard a chilling 911 call. Billy Cope, who was 37 years old, made it when he found his daughter Amanda dead in her bedroom early in the morning on November 29, 2001, in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Billy woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. and knew something was wrong in his house. The hall light was on and he remembered turning it off before going to bed. His wife, Mary Sue, was at her job cleaning offices overnight. So only Billy and his three girls, Amanda, Jessica, and Kyla, were at home. Amanda was the oldest at 12 years old, while Jessica and Kyla were 11 and 7, respectively. As a deeply religious family, they typically attended church on Wednesday nights, but they missed it this particular night because Jessica needed help with her math homework. Showing her caring nature, Amanda volunteered to assist her, and Billy agreed to let them stay up until they finished their work. While the youngest daughter, Kyla, went to bed at 9 p.m., Billy stayed up with the older girls until 1 a.m., guiding them through their school assignments. Afterward, they all retired to bed to get some much-needed rest. Before drifting off to sleep, Billy used his CPAP breathing machine to manage his sleep apnea. Strangely, just 2 hours later, he was awakened by something. Still half asleep, Billy went to check on his daughters. Amanda's door was shut, and he concluded that perhaps she was the one who turned on the hall light. Maybe she'd gotten up in the middle of the night for a drink of water. The other bedroom door was open, and he saw his two younger girls fast asleep in their beds. With his mind more at ease, he returned to his bed, put his breathing machine back on, and quickly fell back to sleep. The following morning at 6 a.m., Billy was awoken by the blaring of his alarm clock. He later stated that during those intermittent hours of sleep, he dreamed about the rapture. In his dream, Jesus had returned to take his followers home. He explained that in his dream, he saw Amanda being taken and him being left behind, with her saying the words, "Bye, Daddy," to him. Still feeling jarred from his intense dream, he quickly left his bed to check on his daughters. He was overwhelmed with relief when he saw his two younger girls still sleeping peacefully in their beds. But his comfort was short-lived. As he tried to open Amanda's door, it was caught on the open closet door behind it. After using force to get through the door, he witnessed an unbearable sight. Amanda's body was lying limp on her bed. When he went to touch her, she was ice cold, and he knew that his nightmare had come true. He then covered her and, still in a state of shock, dialed 911. "Okay, you don't want to try to CPR or anything on her?" "No, ma'am. She's dead. Her mouth is completely shut. She's ice cold." "Okay. When was the last time you saw her live?" "Sir? About 2 o'clock this morning." "About 2 o'clock this morning. Has she been 1 o'clock this morning? Has she been sick or anything?" "No, ma'am. The thing was just wrapped around her neck." "Was it her bed clothing or her sheets?" "It was her blanket. She just had a blanket laying around it. The one that she rolled over and it wrapped around her neck. It's the green thing on the blanket. She laid on the green blanket and it had a string wrapped around it. I mean, I gotta call my wife." Okay, what kind of house do you live in, sir? What color is your house?" "It's white, but she's going on to be with the Lord because she was a Christian." "Please, I really don't know." "Okay, all right, sir. I'll have my light on." "All right, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, and bye-bye." "Bye-bye." Within minutes, paramedics from the fire department arrived at the scene, but their life-saving gear was useless. Amanda was indeed gone. Jason Dillon from the Rock Hill Fire Department asked Billy what he thought had happened, and Billy told them that he thought she may have choked on her blanket, as she had a history of rolling in her sleep. Detectives arrived soon after, and secured the house as an active crime scene, and began an investigation. The detectives were immediately suspicious of Billy's reaction to his daughter's death. His composed demeanor seemed unnatural, and he did not display much emotion at all. Soon, dozens of investigators filled the tiny house looking for clues, but the house was a mess, with the family's belongings cluttering every room. There were clothes piled on every surface, dishes overflowing out of the sinks, cockroaches scurrying into the corners. In the midst of this, Amanda's body lay fully clothed on her bed, surrounded by her books and recent school pictures that she'd just gotten back from the photographer. When the body was examined, investigators found that she'd been beaten and strangled to death after being assaulted. There were bruises on her body, and physical evidence was found on her clothes. The evidence was collected in the hopes that it could be used in identifying the killer. While processing the house for clues, police found another oddity. After examining all the doors and windows, they realized that there were no signs of forced entry into the home. All the entrances were locked from the inside. This indicated to investigators that the killer likely came from within the house. The detective spoke to Billy and asked him how he thought Amanda had died. Billy claimed that she may have been strangled by her blanket in her sleep, which was not in line with the evidence of the crime scene. Detectives knew they needed to dig deeper. Upon looking into his background, they learned that 2 years prior, he and his wife had both pleaded guilty to neglecting the proper care of their children. This was the final piece of information that they needed, along with his emotionless reaction to her death, his bizarre explanation of how she died, and the fact that there were no signs of forced entry into the house. It seemed to the police that Billy was clearly the prime suspect in their case. They immediately took him downtown to the police station for more intense questioning. Over the next few days, detectives grilled Billy mercilessly. He faced over 17 hours of interrogation over the next 4 days. On the first day of interrogation, the 29th of November 2001, the same day of the murder, Billy was questioned for 3.5 hours by detectives. As a result of this initial questioning, detectives had no doubt that he had committed the terrible crime. All they needed from him was a confession. But on that first day, Billy insisted that he was innocent again and again, over 650 times according to the recordings of the interrogations. He told the police that he loved his daughters, and there was no way he would have ever hurt Amanda. He claimed that the only reason he didn't hear anything that night was because the machine he used for sleep apnea was very loud, and it drowned out any outside noise. This seemed unlikely to the investigators, who continued to probe Billy to see if they could get a confession out of him. However, Billy would not admit to the crime. They tried to use his faith against him, saying he'd burn in hell for what he did. They also tried to tell him that if the physical evidence they had collected came back as a match to him, he'd have nowhere to hide. Yet no matter what they said, Billy continued to deny any involvement in the murder of his daughter. Finally, as they entered the 4th hour of questioning on the second day, Billy asked for a polygraph or lie detector test, believing it would be what finally convinced them of his innocence. Unfortunately, this would be where it all began to unravel for Billy. Not long after beginning his polygraph, the individual conducting the test slammed his hand down on the table and told the detectives that they had enough to end the test. He looked Billy in the eye and told him he'd failed the test. Billy was devastated. Following these results, detectives pressed Billy further, wanting to know why he'd done this terrible thing to his daughter. Slowly, Billy began to talk. Billy eventually confessed, yet he seemed unsure of his own statements. The first confession ended with him signing a written statement of what he'd done, admitting to killing his own daughter. But that would not be all. By the end of the 4th day of the interrogation, Billy had given a total of 4 different confessions to the police, and none of them matched each other or aligned with the evidence at the crime scene. In one, Amanda was beaten with a broom, but this was not mentioned in any of his other confessions. Some confessions included a dream, yet in other statements the dream was excluded, or a very different version of the dream was told. None of the details from each individual confession lined up with one another. Regardless of this, detectives accepted them as the truth, even though they believed Billy to be severely mentally disturbed. The 4th and final confession was a video reenactment where the police took him back to his house and taped him as he went over what he did the night of the murder. Eventually, due to his many confessions, Billy was charged as the sole perpetrator in the murder of his daughter. However, after these long interrogations, Billy retracted all of his confessions and again protested his innocence in court. Nonetheless, the damage was done, and Billy was sent to prison with no bond or any form of bail. It seemed like the case was done and dusted, A year had passed since the murder. Billy had confessed to the crime, and many people, even those who knew him, were now convinced that he was indeed guilty. But Billy himself was now once again professing his innocence. Phil Beatty, a private attorney from Rock Hill, was now charged to fight this case in court for him. Phil admits that the first time he met Billy, he thought he was guilty. His strategy for the case was to try and get Billy the best plea deal possible and just put the case to rest. However, after speaking to Billy about the process of his interrogation in the initial days after the murder, Beatty was disturbed by what he'd heard. When his court-assigned public defender, B.J. Barraclough, had arrived at the police station, the police did not allow him into the interrogation room to see Billy, a clear violation of his rights. They produced a note that Billy had allegedly signed, which stated that he did not want to see his attorney at that time. When Barraclough argued that they could have coerced him into signing this note, they simply refused to let him ask his client himself. It was only after this fourth confession that his defense attorney, B.J. Barraclough, was allowed to see him. When he asked Billy why he'd signed the confession, Billy replied that the police had told him he'd get the death penalty if he didn't sign it. Beatty was shocked at the clear violation of Billy's rights. However, since the confessions had been written and signed, he was unsure if this information would aid in his case. In an unexpected turn of events in late 2002, Beatty got a call from the prosecutor's office asking for a meeting. Believing this was in regards to a deal for his client, he agreed to meet with them, but he could never have expected what they were about to tell him. As they sat him down, they explained to him that the DNA found on Amanda's body had finally been processed and, to the surprise of everyone, the DNA was not Billy's. Beatty was shocked but also happy to hear this news because it now meant that his client was innocent and he had a real chance to win this case. But what they would tell him next would shock him even more. He was told that the police had been aware within a few weeks of the murder that the DNA was not a match to Billy, but had kept this information to themselves for over a year. This infuriated Beatty to no end. He could not believe such a grievous miscarriage of justice had been carried out, and that no one had thought this information was important enough to inform Billy's lawyers about it before this time. But then he stopped and asked why they decided to tell him this information now. After all these months, if they'd known it was not Billy's DNA all that time ago. And that is when the final piece of information was revealed to him. He was told that the reason he was being told all of this now was that the police had found a match to the DNA in the system and they knew whose it was. It belonged to a man named James Sanders. There's not much information known about James Sanders' past, where he came from or what he was doing prior to 2001. All that's known is he was a career criminal who had committed a variety of crimes prior to this horrific one. He'd been released from prison and moved into the same neighborhood as the Copes only about 2 weeks prior to him killing Amanda. He lived in a house only 2 blocks away from where Billy and his family lived. There's no evidence present that the two men knew each other, and they certainly would have made an unusual pair. Billy Cope was, in the words of his lawyer, a socially isolated 385-pound white man. He was also a devout Christian and aspiring preacher. James Sanders, on the other hand, was an African-American career criminal and drug addict who'd recently gotten out of prison. In the 6 weeks following Amanda's murder in November 2001, Sanders committed or attempted to commit 4 more sexual assaults in the neighborhood. Now that his attorneys knew there was another man whose DNA had been found at the scene of the crime, they realized that Billy was factually innocent. They then questioned him seriously as to why he provided false confessions to the police when he was interrogated right after the murder occurred. Billy told his lawyers that when he was questioned by the police in the hours following the murder, he had been sure of his innocence, but he'd also been in a state of shock having just lost his daughter in such a traumatic manner. Due to this, he may have appeared emotionless to them. He also told them that he provided false confessions in an effort to confuse the police. He believed that his confessions would not carry any weight unless police were able to prove them, and he didn't believe the evidence would point to any of his confessions being legitimate. However, in this matter, he was wrong, as the police were willing to accept his confessions, even though none of them matched each other, or indeed the evidence found at the scene. Despite Sanders being identified as being present the night that Amanda was killed, Billy was still charged with a crime. The case went to trial in 2004, and the trial was centered around both sides trying to prove what actually had taken place the night of the murder. While Billy's lawyers argued that Billy was not involved in his daughter's death in any manner, the prosecutors found a simple explanation for both Billy's confessions and the new DNA evidence that had been found. They said that the only logical explanation was that both men were in on it and had carried out the crime together. The prosecutors alleged that this is why there were no signs of forced entry into the house, as Billy had let Sanders in and then locked up again once he left. Cope's attorneys said prosecutors were just trying to present the evidence in this manner so they could cover up their inappropriate interrogation tactics. They argued that Cope had mental issues and was so devastated by his daughter's death that detectives were able to manipulate him into confessing to a crime he did not commit. The defense was also not allowed to present crucial evidence to the jury to Judge John C. Hayes III, not allowing it on the grounds of it leading the jury to a logical fallacy. The evidence that was excluded was the fact that in the forced sexual assaults that Sanders had committed or attempted in the weeks following Amanda's murder, there was never any sign of forced entry. It certainly appears that Sanders was a master at breaking and entering and left no evidence for even the most seasoned of detectives to find. Another key piece of evidence the defense lawyers were not allowed to present to the jury was the testimony from a jailhouse informant who claimed he had overheard Sanders say he had raped and killed a little girl in Rock Hill. These sorts of testimonies are often allowed by courts when they help prosecutors, but in this case, when it could have helped the defendant, it was not allowed. While it may seem clear to you that Billy was not involved in his daughter's death at all, this is not how the jury ended up seeing it. Both Sanders and Billy were convicted and were charged with conspiracy, which means they collaborated with each other to commit the crime. They were each given life sentences without the chance of parole in 2004. In April 2009, the verdict was appealed, and a 3-judge panel from the South Carolina Court of Appeals reversed the conspiracy conviction, ruling that there was no evidence that Cope and Sanders knew each other. However, the South Carolina Attorney General appealed this decision soon after, and the decision was overturned. In 2013, the state Supreme Court upheld Cope's conviction, and the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear his case. Despite all the evidence seemingly pointing towards Billy's innocence, he remained behind bars. On February 9, 2017, at the age of 53, Billy Cope died of natural causes in state custody. He never got to see the outside of a jail cell after being charged with the murder of his own daughter. It's up to you to determine whether he was truly guilty or not. So, that's the story, folks. The tragic tale of the murder of Amanda Cope and the nightmare ordeal that followed for her father Billy. What do you think of the case? Do you think Billy was innocent or guilty? More importantly, was justice served for Amanda Cope? It's not uncommon for teenagers to feel frustrated with their parents. They may not always understand each other, but in most cases, love prevails. However, there are extreme cases where hatred leads to tragic outcomes. Gypsy Rose Blanchard saw her mother killed by her boyfriend, and Lizzie Borden allegedly took an axe to her father and stepmother. Today, we delve into the Menendez brothers' case, where 2 young men with promising futures became suspects in the brutal murder of their parents. The Menendez family represented the American dream. Jose Menendez immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba, earning a scholarship to Southern Illinois University, majoring in accounting. He met and married Mary Louise Anderson, known as Kitty. Kitty had a challenging upbringing, with her father abandoning her family at a young age. Despite reservations about Jose's Cuban heritage, they married. The couple moved to New York, where Kitty worked as a teacher and Jose began a successful career as a corporate executive. Their sons, Joseph Lyle Menendez, known as Lyle and Eric, were born in 1968 and 2 years later, respectively. Jose's job took the family to New Jersey and later to Beverly Hills, where they lived in a mansion once owned by Michael Jackson and Elton John. The Menendez family was affluent, living a life that surpassed financial comfort. In Beverly Hills, Eric attended Beverly Hills High, where he demonstrated average academic performance but excelled in tennis. However, he also fell in with a troubled crowd, getting involved in delinquent activities. This sets the stage for the events that would unfold, leading to one of the most infamous murder cases in recent history. Eric and Lyle Menendez's lives took a dark turn, especially with Eric's involvement in burglaries and Lyle's academic struggles at Princeton University. Lyle faced academic probation and eventually suspension for plagiarism, giving the impression that they were not fully utilizing their family's wealth. On August 20th, 1989, the Menendez brothers made a fateful decision that would forever alter their lives. In a shocking turn of events, they burst into the family den while Jose and Kitty were watching TV and fired shotguns at their parents. Jose succumbed almost instantly, while Kitty managed to run partway down the hall before Lyle fired the fatal shot. After the gruesome act, Eric and Lyle changed into clean clothes and drove away, seemingly concocting an alibi by watching a movie, Batman. They disposed of their weapons on the way back home. The aftermath included a chilling 911 call from Eric Menendez, simply stating, "They killed our parents. What's the problem?" This marked the beginning of a case that would captivate public attention for years to come. The Menendez brothers, Eric and Lyle, successfully diverted suspicion in the immediate aftermath of the gruesome crime. Investigators initially considered the crime scene so brutal that it resembled a mob hit, leading them to explore potential rival businessmen as suspects. Eric and Lyle, playing the roles of shocked and grieving sons, managed to avoid suspicion. Believing they had gotten away with murder, the brothers began to enjoy the substantial wealth they were set to inherit. With Jose Menendez's net worth estimated at about $14 million, the brothers wasted no time in spending the money. In the days following their parents' funeral, Lyle splurged on luxury items, including 3 Rolex watches, new clothes, a Porsche, and a significant purchase, a street cafe in Princeton. Eric, too, indulged in a Rolex, expensive clothing, and gambling losses. He abandoned his college plans in favor of hiring a tennis coach with aspirations of becoming a professional player, dedicating 10 hours a day to practice and competing in tournaments in the Middle East. The brothers moved out of their family's Beverly Hills mansion, opting for rented condos in Marina del Rey, where they hosted lavish parties and movie nights. Their extravagant spending, estimated to be close to $1 million in just a few months, raised suspicions. However, it was not their lavish lifestyle that eventually led to their downfall. Eric's past therapy sessions, initiated when he got caught in teenage burglaries, came back into play. His former therapist reached out to him after the death of his parents, inviting him to resume therapy sessions. This unexpected reconnection with the past would play a crucial role in unraveling the Menendez brothers' secrets. Dr. L. Jerome Oziel played a significant, albeit controversial, role in the Menendez brothers' case. His involvement began when he secretly recorded therapy sessions with Eric Menendez, driven by a desire to impress his girlfriend, Judy Lawn Smith. Unbeknownst to Dr. Oziel, Eric, burdened by guilt, began suffering from stress-related ulcers, and eventually confessed to the murder of his parents during therapy sessions. In one session, while Menendez joined Eric, and tensions escalated when Eric revealed the crime to Dr. Oziel. Reportedly, Lyle reacted with anger and threats toward Eric for divulging their secret. In another session with both brothers, Lyle admitted they had contemplated harming Dr. Oziel. Dr. Oziel faced a moral and legal dilemma. While therapists are bound by strict rules of confidentiality, the revelation of a serious crime might justify breaking that confidentiality to report it to the police. Instead of following the appropriate legal channels, Dr. Oziel shared this sensitive information with his girlfriend, Judy Lawn Smith. Horrified by the confession, Judy Lawn took matters into her own hands and reported Eric and Lyle to the police in March 1990. Lyle was subsequently arrested for the murder of his parents. Eric, who was in Israel for a tennis tournament, learned of his brother's arrest, flew back to Miami, and voluntarily surrendered to the police. The Menendez brothers' trial spanned 7 years, marked by various challenges and controversies. The Menendez brothers' trial faced various challenges, and one major issue was the use of Dr. Oziel's recordings of the therapy sessions as evidence. The judge eventually allowed parts of the tapes to be used, but not the entire recordings. Initially, Eric and Lyle were tried separately, leading to further complications. Their defense, led by attorney Leslie Abramson, argued that the brothers had suffered abuse at the hands of their father throughout their lives. They detailed the pain in their home and claimed that their actions were driven by the desire to end their mother's perceived misery due to her struggles with alcohol. This defense strategy resulted in both juries reaching a deadlock after 2 weeks, meaning they couldn't decide whether the brothers were guilty or not. Subsequently, it was decided that Eric and Lyle would be tried together. In this joint trial, the prosecutors shifted focus to the brothers' extravagant spending in the 6 months following their parents' deaths, questioning the validity of their stories about their father's cruelty, given that the only other witnesses were deceased. The jury ultimately found Eric and Lyle guilty of first-degree murder, and they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Menendez brothers' case, resurfacing on TikTok due to videos featuring clips from their interviews and trials, often set to music like Britney Spears' Criminal, has sparked mixed reactions. While some people acknowledge that Eric, in particular, was considered attractive during the trial, others criticize these videos for being childish and insensitive. There's particular concern about the inclusion of clips where the brothers detail the alleged abuse they suffered from their father, especially considering the emotional nature of those moments. It's mentioned that Eric is aware of these TikTok videos, and his daughter Talia has responded to comments indicating that he does know about them. The idea that individuals convicted of crimes may become aware of TikTok trends discussing their cases raises questions about the sensitivity and responsibility of content creators on the platform. The commentary on these videos invites reflection on the ethical considerations when discussing or creating content around criminal cases, especially those involving serious offenses. Case 2. What would you do if your daughter went missing? Most of us, I presume, would do everything in our power to find a missing child, searching tirelessly throughout the city or leveraging all available resources to make their disappearance known to the media. Today's case revolves around a family that tragically lost their daughter, and in the process, became one of the most scrutinized and controversial families in Mexico. Even a decade later, people still talk about this case. I want to emphasize that while the theories and details are intriguing, this case is a real tragedy and, in my opinion, a miscarriage of justice. This is the story of Paulette Cabarra Ferrar. Born on July 20, 2005, in Mexico City, to her parents Lizette Ferrar and Marcelo Cabarra, Paulette had an older sister named Lizette Jr. to keep things simple. I'll refer to her as Lizette Jr. Paulette reportedly lived with a physical disability affecting her movement and a language disorder that made verbal communication challenging. On March 21, 2010, a Sunday evening, Paulette and Lizette Jr., who was 7 years older, returned home with their dad after a weekend trip. Their mom, Lizette, did not accompany them. She went on a trip with her friend Amanda to Los Cabos. Upon returning, Lizette greeted her daughters and put them to bed, just as she always did. Nothing seemed amiss or strange with the family. Lizette, an attorney, and Marcelo, involved in real estate, worked long hours but had 2 nannies to ensure the girls were taken care of during the day. The morning after returning from their trip, the nannies arrived to prepare the 2 sisters for the day. However, when Erica, one of the nannies, went into Paulette's room to wake her, she found the bed empty. Despite searching the apartment, Paulette was nowhere to be found. Given that they lived in a high-rise building and Paulette had difficulty walking unassisted, it seemed highly unlikely that she left on her own. Unable to believe she could have left the apartment independently, the nannies, Erica and her sister Martha, immediately contacted their employers. Paulette's disappearance garnered national attention, dominating conversations throughout Mexico. Desperate to find their daughter, her parents initiated an extensive campaign with flyers, missing persons posters scattered across the city, and even billboards displaying details of Paulette's disappearance. The perplexity deepened as there were no signs of an intruder or struggle in her bedroom. They owned 2 dogs, which remained silent that night, adding to the mystery. It appeared as if Paulette had simply vanished. Alberto Bazbaz, the Attorney General of the state, became heavily involved in the case. This marked the first major controversy. In Mexico, hundreds of children go missing each year, yet Paulette's case gained unusual prominence. Some speculated that it was because her family was affluent. A week after Paulette's disappearance, suspicion grew, leading to the arrest of both parents and the 2 nannies. The situation was becoming increasingly convoluted. As conflicting stories unfolded in the media, Lizette and Marcelo's behavior raised suspicions, especially when secret recordings captured Lizette instructing Lizette Jr. not to say anything to the police or face consequences. Despite the suspicions, all four, Lizette, Marcelo, and the two nannies, were released the same day without charges. However, 2 days later, the case took a perplexing turn. Investigators independently decided to recreate their search of Paulette's room after her disappearance, an action that raised eyebrows. Conducted at 2 a.m., an odd time considering the original search didn't happen then, the video revealed investigators pointing out sheets and pillowcases that appeared bloodstained. They asserted that Paulette had been severely beaten. However, the shocking revelation occurred when they pulled back the blankets at the foot of the bed. Paulette's body was there, lodged between the end of the mattress and the foot of the bed. This discovery transformed the case into a media circus. How could Paulette be there for 9 days without anyone noticing? The nannies insisted she wasn't there the morning she went missing, claiming they had thoroughly searched the room. Over 100 people had been in that room during the investigations, making it puzzling that no one found her before. More disturbingly, family and friends, including Lizette's friend Amanda, had slept in the bed during those 9 days before Paulette was found. This intensified suspicions, especially towards Paulette's parents. According to Erica, while others were frantically searching, the parents, notably Lizette, didn't appear upset. Erica noted that the morning after Paulette went missing, Lizette was in the living room, seemingly relaxed, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. Even more alarming were Lizette's alleged jokes about her daughter's whereabouts. The situation was becoming increasingly unsettling. Despite the lack of ransom calls, Lizette Farrar made bizarre suggestions, including the idea that Paulette might have been abducted by aliens or even Harry Potter. The most alarming comment was when she said, "Even if I lose Paulette, I still have another daughter." Despite the peculiar circumstances surrounding Paulette's discovery, her death was officially ruled an accident. The coroner's report stated that Paulette slept with an orthopedic blanket over her mouth, and during the night she either got tangled or swallowed part of the blanket. As a result, she rolled to the end of her bed, wedging herself between the mattress and the frame, ultimately suffocating. This explanation contradicted the investigators at the reenactment who claimed there was blood all over the bed, suggesting physical injuries. Despite the coroner's conclusion, many people doubted the official account, believing the police were attempting to cover up the true circumstances of Paulette's death. Even Alberto Basbas, who disputed the claims that Paulette's death was accidental, found no evidence of her in the room during his search. Lizette continued to face criticism for her behavior after the discovery of Paulette's body. Described as unconcerned and emotionless, legal psychiatric expert Sandra Yardyam agreed with this assessment. Lizette's apparent lack of emotional attachment raised further questions. The investigation's pressure took a toll on Lizette and Marcelo's marriage, culminating in an official divorce in 2014. Following Paulette's discovery, Lizette filed a restraining order against the rest of her family and took Marcelo to court over the custody of Lizette Jr. in the media. Accusations were thrown back and forth, with each accusing the other of knowing something about Paulette's death. However, these accusations did not lead to any substantial revelations. The case of Paulette Cabrera remains enigmatic, with scant evidence against her parents, Paulette or Mercutio, apart from their peculiar behavior and a disputed recording. Comparisons have been drawn to the John Bonnet Ramsey case, where a girl from a wealthy family goes missing, turns up dead in her own home, and her parents appear suspicious. Unlike John Bonnet's case, one hopes that Paulette's mystery can one day be unraveled, though as the years pass, this seems increasingly unlikely. Paulette was laid to rest on April 6, 2010, with her father absent from the service. Lizette told the press that Mercutio believed she was involved in their daughter's death and had requested she not attend the service. In May of that year, Alberto Basbas resigned as a regional attorney general over the handling of the case. Despite his insistence that the case was conducted properly, criticisms mounted from the media, the public, and politicians. The investigation's closure in 2017 led to the exhumation and cremation of Paulette's remains, limiting potential future physical evidence. Mercutio now leads a private life, keeping away from the media and online presence. Lizette, too, remains private, but occasionally gives interviews, often defending her innocence. In one interview, she expressed no grudge against the press, but resented the speculation that made it into reputable news resources. Paulette's sister, now almost 18, maintains a minimal online presence. One can only hope she has had a semblance of a normal childhood. If she holds any information, there is the hope that, with time, she may gain the confidence to share her perspective. The case remains a perplexing puzzle, leaving many questions unanswered. The notion that Paulette was in that room for 9 days, unnoticed by anyone, adds to the mystery. Still with me? Good, that means you're ready for the rest. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want more cases just like this one. As police delved into the disappearance of 34-year-old hairstylist Jolene Cummings, their focus swiftly shifted to her peculiar coworker, Jennifer Seibert. Within a short time, detectives unearthed a literal blood trail connecting the 50-year-old Seibert to what appeared to be a gruesome murder. However, there was a twist. Seibert had been deceased since 1987. This marked just the beginning of a series of perplexing turns that would transform this case into one of Florida's most bizarre and unsettling criminal investigations. Welcome to our channel, where we unravel and explore the most enigmatic, chilling, and bewildering cases from across the globe. Before we delve into the details, our heartfelt thoughts and prayers go out to the loved ones of Jolene Cummings, who fell victim to the heinous actions of one woman. Now, let's journey to Fernandina Beach, Florida, a picturesque haven where the sun graces the shores of the Atlantic Ocean and sets over the serene waters of the Amelia River. Once inhabited by the Timucua Indian tribe, Fernandina Beach boasts long stretches of pristine beaches, teeming wildlife, and a quaint, historic seaport town. For many, it's an idyllic escape from the rigors of daily life, or in this instance, an escape from a shadowy and troubled past. In 2018, Jennifer Seibert, aged 50, sought a fresh beginning in Fernandina Beach, finding employment at a local hair salon named Tangles. It marked her 5th job in 6 months, and this time, Seibert hoped it would be enduring. She had spent years evading her past, concealing far too many ominous secrets. Among these secrets was the fate of 35-year-old Kimberly Kessler, who had vanished from Butler County, Pennsylvania, in the mid-2000s. Despite 8 years passing before Kessler's family filed a missing persons report, not a single friend or relative knew her whereabouts. However, Seibert harbored the truth about Kessler's destiny, safeguarding it fiercely. Yet, trouble and suspicion seemed to shadow Seibert relentlessly. She perceived a constant threat of betrayal, convinced that others conspired against her, a paranoia that followed her even to Tangles. On May 18, 2018, tensions reached a boiling point between 50-year-old Jennifer Seibert and her coworker, 34-year-old Jolene Cummings, at Tangles Hair Salon. Jolene seemed to possess an uncanny intuition about Seibert's past, relentlessly probing her with questions and openly expressing her suspicions to their colleagues. This relentless scrutiny pushed Seibert to her breaking point. On that fateful day, Jolene caught Seibert eavesdropping, and when she stepped outside with another coworker, Seibert deliberately followed, prompting Jolene to confront her directly. Jolene accused Seibert of being fake and labeled her as crazy. Seibert didn't engage in argument, already devising a plan to deal with Jolene. The following day, during their shift at the salon, Seibert struggled to maintain composure, uncertain if she could execute her plan successfully. Jolene's persistent requests for assistance with clients only added to Seibert's frustration. Seibert feigned confusion when approached by Jolene, pretending to be preoccupied with her phone behind a wall. Despite Jolene's cheerful demeanor with clients, tensions simmered beneath the surface. May 13, 2018, marked Jolene's birthday and Mother's Day, and she was eagerly anticipating celebrating with her 3 young children. Surveillance footage captured Seibert at a gas station in the early hours of May 13, explaining to the manager that her facial scratches resulted from an altercation with a friend's ex-boyfriend. She requested to use the manager's phone to call a taxi, citing the need to return to the salon for additional cleaning. Meanwhile, at 1 p.m. on May 13th, Jolene's ex-husband, Jason Cummings, awaited her arrival at a Winn-Dixie in Hilliard, prepared to hand over their 3 children to her custody. On May 13, 2018, Jolene Cummings, a 34-year-old hairstylist, was notably absent, which raised concerns among her ex-husband, Jason Cummings, particularly since it was her birthday and Mother's Day. Jason, worried about her well-being, attempted to contact her, but his calls went unanswered. Eventually, he decided to return home with their children, feeling deeply concerned. Later that afternoon, Jason reached out to Jolene's mother and Johnson, who shared his worries, and then reported her daughter missing to local law enforcement. The sheriff's department promptly issued a missing persons flyer and, on the morning of May 15th, visited Tangle's hair salon, where they sought to speak with Jennifer Sibbert, believed to be the last person to have seen Jolene. However, when Sibbert learned about the police's arrival, she immediately fled the scene, claiming to have concerns about a stalker who could track her down if her name entered police databases. This behavior raised suspicion, prompting officers to scrutinize Sibbert further. Investigators discovered that Sibbert had provided false addresses, and when they located her, she was found asleep in her car at a rest area in St. Johns County. Sibbert had bandages on her face and hands, which she attributed to injuries sustained from riding her bike into a tree branch. It was apparent that she had been living in her car for some time. Meanwhile, authorities found Jolene's abandoned SUV in a Home Depot parking lot. Surveillance footage revealed that someone exited the vehicle shortly after it entered the lot at 1:17 a.m. on May 13th. But it was not Jolene. It was Jennifer Sibbert. Sibbert was arrested for the theft of Jolene's car on May 16th and taken into custody. However, during the booking process, authorities made a startling discovery. The social security number Sibbert provided belonged to a deceased individual who died in a car crash in 1987. Fingerprint analysis confirmed that Jennifer Sibbert was, in fact, Kimberly Lee Kessler, the missing woman from Butler County, Pennsylvania. The revelation of Kessler's true identity sparked further investigation into her past, raising questions about her involvement in other unsolved disappearances. Kessler's childhood appeared normal until her early teens, when classmates noticed a drastic change in her demeanor, describing her transformation as if she had become a completely different person. Kimberly Lee Kessler's transformation from a seemingly normal teenager to a frightening and violent individual was profound, according to those who knew her. Former classmates described how she transitioned from running with the popular crowd to becoming someone to be feared, with a violent temper and extreme reactions to perceived slights. Ray Wyant, a classmate who observed Kessler's change, described her as scary, noting that everyone was frightened of her. Another acquaintance, Tim Barnes, who dated and lived with Kessler for a brief period after high school, recalled her explosive rages and violent behavior. Barnes recounted instances where Kessler killed his cat with a shotgun, stabbed him in the chest, and assaulted his father. In 1987, the same year of Jennifer Sibbert's supposed death, Kessler's brother Bob was involved in a motorcycle accident that claimed the life of his friend. Rumors circulated that someone, potentially Kessler, had run them off the road. Around this time, Kessler began showing interest in using aliases, visiting graveyards to find names she could adopt as her own. Kessler's history of assuming false identities continued into adulthood. She married Xylon Lossie twice in the early 1990s under the alias Melissa McKernan. Later, she dated Tim Edwards, with whom she had a child. She used the name Miranda McKernan, but listed Christina Brooks on their son's birth certificate, allegedly to conceal her whereabouts from her abusive family. However, Kessler also told her family that she needed to use fake names to evade her child's abusive father. In 1999, her son was taken into social services custody, prompting Kessler to visit their offices with a handgun in a failed attempt to retrieve him. Subsequently, she disappeared, and neither her ex-partners nor her son heard from her again. Kessler's erratic and violent behavior, along with her propensity for adopting false identities, painted a disturbing picture of a troubled individual with a troubled past, leaving many to wonder about her potential involvement in other unsolved cases. Life after disappearing from Butler County in 2004 was marked by a pattern of transient living and adopting various identities for Kimberly Lee Kessler. During this time, she moved from state to state, taking on different jobs ranging from waitressing to stripping. Her acquaintances described her as odd, unable to hold a job, and often accused of theft. She was noted for her vindictiveness, with a tendency to retaliate against those who crossed her. Kessler's behavior became increasingly erratic over the years. She collected new identities and personas, displaying a chameleon-like ability to blend into different environments while engaging in scams, theft, and other criminal activities. One man she connected with on Facebook recounted how she impulsively drove from Florida to Texas to meet him for lunch, then proposed marriage within hours of meeting. Her extreme jealousy and fits of rage led one ex-partner to fear for his life, prompting him to involve the police and eventually leave town. In 2009, under the alias Jennifer Sibbert, Kessler rented a room from a man in Clearwater. She accused him of breaking into her house and urinating on her bed before being evicted. Her behavior at work was described as bizarre, erratic, and secretive, with coworkers feeling that her history was fabricated. In 2014, while training at a Jacksonville hair academy, Kessler exhibited disturbing behavior such as climbing into a cabinet and asking to keep a sunburned skin. By 2018, Kessler had lived in numerous states, used multiple aliases, and mastered the art of identity theft and disguise. Her employment at Tangle's hair salon in Fernandina Beach was preceded by a brief stint at Woody's Barbecue, where her unusual behavior and eating habits raised concerns among coworkers. Overall, Kessler's post-disappearance life was characterized by a nomadic existence marked by criminal activity, erratic behavior, and the constant reinvention of her identity, culminating in her involvement in the disappearance of Jolene Cummings, under the alias Jennifer Sibbert. May 13, 2018, the morning after Jolene Cummings disappeared, surveillance cameras captured Kessler driving Cummings' SUV into a Home Depot parking lot at 1:17 a.m. A few minutes later, Kessler was seen exiting the vehicle, not Cummings. This pivotal moment placed Kessler at the scene where Cummings' vehicle was abandoned. As investigators delved deeper into Kessler's digital footprint, they uncovered a disturbing pattern of searches and behaviors leading up to Cummings' disappearance. Weeks before the event, Kessler had photographed Cummings' appointment diary and conducted searches related to missing persons, bodies not being found, and methods of committing murder. She also looked up information on meth addicts and plastination, a technique used to preserve anatomical specimens. On May 5th, just days before Cummings went missing, Kessler's suspicious behavior at a boating supply store raised concerns. She purchased heavy-duty zip ties, prompting an employee to contact the authorities due to her unsettling demeanor. Despite Kessler's initial refusal to cooperate with law enforcement and her request for legal counsel during interrogation, the mounting evidence against her painted a damning picture. Her calculated actions, including surveillance of Cummings, internet searches related to murder, and purchasing items potentially used in a crime, indicated premeditation and planning. Sheriff Bill Leeper announced on May 22, 2018, that investigators had reason to believe Jolene Cummings was deceased and Kessler was being held on a $500,000 bond. The intensive search for Cummings' body commenced as authorities continued to build their case against Kessler. Surveillance footage from the day of Jolene Cummings' disappearance revealed Kimberly Kessler's suspicious activities. After driving Cummings' SUV to a Home Depot parking lot, Kessler was seen at a gas station calling a taxi with scratches on her face. She then returned to the salon where she worked. Subsequent video footage captured Kessler purchasing items from Walmart, including trash bags, gloves, an electric knife, and a large bottle of ammonia. She was later observed struggling to move heavy trash bags to a dumpster near the hair salon. Extensive blood evidence was discovered at the salon, implicating Kessler in the crime. Blood stains were found throughout the reception area, desk, walls, chairs, cabinets, and sink. Luminol testing revealed blood on a mop and mop strokes on the floor, suggesting an attempt to clean up the crime scene. A tote bag dumped outside the salon also tested positive for blood. Investigators found additional blood evidence linking Kessler to the crime in her storage unit, including blood on her black combat boots, a sock, and a pair of scissors. They also discovered various items, including multiple license plates, cell phones, wigs, and cut ponytails. Kessler's online search history revealed disturbing queries about dismemberment, along with numerous searches related to Cummings' name over a 48-hour period. When Kessler was arrested, deputies noted injuries on her hands, arm, wrist, and thighs, as well as a missing patch of hair from her head and a bite mark on her thumb. Investigators believe Kessler dismembered Cummings' body and disposed of it in a dumpster. Despite extensive efforts by law enforcement and the FBI to locate Cummings' body in a landfill, they were unsuccessful. Kessler, held on a $500,000 bond, contacted her mother, instructing her to retrieve her belongings, including a motorbike and bicycle. She attributed media coverage to the Illuminati and made bizarre claims during her interactions with law enforcement. Kessler's behavior, including hunger strikes and requests for relocation to psychiatric facilities, prolonged the legal process. She was indicted for first-degree murder in September 2018, but her trial did not begin until November 2021 due to her disruptive actions. How weighing whether murder suspect Kimberly Kessler is mentally competent and whether she'll need to be force-fed. This follows bombshell testimony this morning where those overseeing Kessler's care say she has refused to eat and now weighs 74 pounds, down from 89 last month. Dressed in a jailhouse suit for inmates on suicide watch, Kimberly Kessler appeared cheerful, even slightly smiling at times. It didn't last. After being led from view, she turned her anger toward the judge. A psychologist testified that Kessler exhibited unstable mental health and voiced delusional beliefs. She has voiced, in my opinion, delusional beliefs that the food is poisoned. Kessler's dramatic weight loss, dropping from 196 to just 74 pounds, was attributed to her hunger strike, although she reportedly started eating again after being seen binge-eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. However, Kessler's behavior has complicated the competency analysis, with criminal defense lawyer Janet Johnson noting that it's challenging to determine whether her actions stem from a lack of understanding or a deliberate statement. Despite multiple competency hearings and courtroom outbursts leading to delays, a judge ultimately ruled Kessler competent to stand trial. Had Kimberly Kessler's behavior was not indicative of delusion, but rather manipulation and psychopathy? Despite her attempts to portray herself as mentally ill, jurors recognized her cunning nature. Kessler's actions in the Nassau County Jail were described as traumatizing to guards and staff, leading to a sense of relief when she was transferred. During her time in jail, she engaged in disturbing behavior, including starving herself, smearing feces, stripping naked and verbally abusing staff. At her court appearances, Kessler continued her disruptive behavior, making repeated outbursts and accusations. However, despite her attempts to discredit the case against her, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder based on overwhelming circumstantial evidence. She was subsequently sentenced to mandatory life in prison. During a press conference, Nassau County Sheriff Bill Leeper emphasized the closure brought by Kessler's conviction, noting the chilling impact of her actions on the community. The account paints a chilling picture of Kimberly Kessler, suggesting the possibility that she may have been a serial killer. Investigators discovered a list of over 60 names on Kessler's phone, labeled with disturbing descriptors like Satanist, witch, and evil murderous gang. Among these names were Kurt Christopher Allen, who died in Jacksonville in 2014, and Grace Darling Bartley, who passed away in Kessler's hometown in 2009. Notably, Kessler had stabbed at least 2 men prior to Jolene's murder. Kessler's penchant for disguises may have been driven not only by her mental instability, but also by warrants out for her arrest in multiple states. Her refusal to disclose the location of Jolene's remains further underscores her callousness and lack of remorse. Jolene's tragic death not only robbed her family of a beloved daughter and mother, but also left them grappling with the agony of waiting for justice and closure. And Johnson, Jolene's mother, expressed the heartache of this prolonged ordeal, particularly for Jolene's 3 children. Ultimately, the story serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary individuals and the devastating impact of their actions on innocent lives. We all know about groups of people with strong religious beliefs, and sometimes bad things happen because of them. But in 2019, something really shocking occurred. 2 kids went missing and several people lost their lives. Before we begin, We want to send our thoughts and prayers to all the people who became victims of this crazy couple. Now, let's go to San Bernardino, California. Lori Noreen Cox, who later changed her last name to Volo, was born in 1973 on June 26 to Janice and Barry Cox. She had a big family with brothers named Alex and Adam, and 3 sisters, Stacy, Laura, and Summer. Lori's childhood was normal, but let's fast forward to 1992. She married her high school boyfriend, Nelson Yanes, when she was 19. Even though they were deeply in love, things went wrong after a year, and their beautiful love story ended in divorce. But Lori didn't stay single for long. 2 years later, in 1995, she became a wife again, marrying a man named William. Things seemed good, and they even had a son named Colby Ryan. However, a pattern emerged, and in 1998, Lori divorced William. 3 more years passed, and Lori decided to become a wife for the 3rd time. In 2001, she married Joseph Ryan. The couple had a child on September 24, 2002. This time, Lori welcomed a daughter named Tylee into the world. However, it seemed like the 3rd time wasn't a charm because in 2004, Lori asked for a divorce. The two didn't part ways amicably. Lori told her brother Alex that her ex-husband was abusive towards her. In response, Alex threatened Joseph and even attacked him with a taser because of his actions. Her brother ended up with a 90-day prison sentence and 5 years of probation. Despite the tumultuous relationships, Lori was a very attractive woman and caught the attention of many admirers. In 2004, she even took part in the Miss Texas beauty pageant. However, Lori was a free spirit and had a tendency to be impatient. She wouldn't tolerate things not going her way and often had a selfish attitude. More often than not, her partners would end up on the losing side of any argument. By 2005, Lori found herself single again. Even though she had 2 kids, only Tylee was in her care full-time. During that year, she met another man. Lori fell in love again, but this time, her new soon-to-be husband would play a crucial role in the unfolding case. Charles Vallow, Lori's new love interest, was a hard-working and handsome man from a big family. Born on August 17, 1956, Charles met Lori when he was 49, but he appeared youthful and full of energy. The pattern emerged once more, and on February 4, 2006, Lori heard wedding bells for the 4th time. Charles already had 2 children from a previous marriage, Nicholas and Zachary. Combine them with Lori's son Colby and daughter Tylee, and the married couple formed a family of 6. This time, things seemed to be going well. The family was happy, Charles had a decent income, and they were all in a good place. In 2014, the couple decided to adopt Charles's grandnephew, Joshua Jackson Vallow, affectionately known as JJ. By then, the 3 boys were living elsewhere, so Lori and Charles only had Tylee and JJ to take care of. Lori didn't work, and she was someone who easily got bored. Seeking a new adventure, the family of 4 packed their bags and moved to Hawaii to start a new business. They opened a juice bar called Juice Island in Princeville, on the island of Kauai. Everyone appeared to enjoy their time there, with Lori and her daughter sharing beautiful shots of the scenery on social media. During their time in Hawaii, Lori became fascinated by a series of books called Standing in Holy Places. Already a Mormon and deeply religious due to her upbringing, these books intensified her beliefs. Reading them brought about changes in her lifestyle and overall demeanor. Despite the idyllic surroundings, their business venture was not successful. After a couple of years, in late 2016, they had no choice but to move back to Arizona. This marked the beginning of the downfall in the Vallow household. Lori remained invested in the series of books, this time written by Chad Daybell, a religious author. In 2018, Lori and her friend Melanie attended an event called Preparing a People. This gathering turned out to be where she met the author of the books that seemingly changed her life and how she saw the world around her. For those questioning why they would attend a preparedness conference, Lori and her friend discussed preparing a statement to share upon their return. During the event, Lori and her friend engaged with Chad Daybell, the author of the influential books. They discussed their beliefs, and Chad even expressed a fondness for Lori, claiming they had been married in 7 previous lifetimes. Despite the event ending, Lori and Chad continued messaging and staying in touch. A few weeks later, when Charles was away on a business trip, Lori invited Chad Daybell to her home. However, the gathering wasn't romantic. Melanie and other followers of Chad joined them, and they spent the evening delving into the deeper meanings of God and various religious theories and teachings. Chad couldn't help but focus on Lori, making her the center of attention in their discussions. Chad Daybell had always been an eccentric figure. Born on August 11, 1968 in Provo, Utah, he grew up in a peculiar way. During his teen years, he met a girl named Tamara, and by the age of 22, they were married. 2 years later, in 1992, he graduated with a degree in journalism. Chad Daybell's life took an interesting turn. After working as a gravedigger at a local cemetery, he ventured into entrepreneurship in 2004 by starting his own book company named Spring Creek Books. About half of the books he published were ones that Lori had become obsessed with during her previous marriage to Tamara. Chad and Tamara had 5 children, and the family relocated to Rexburg, Idaho, with Chad claiming that God had directed them to do so. Chad viewed the world uniquely, categorizing people as either light or dark. In his perspective, dark individuals were from Earth but followers of Satan, while light people were followers of Jesus. During a gathering, Chad informed Lori that she was an eternal being with 21 previous lives, 5 of which were on planet Earth. Lori not only embraced these teachings but became genuinely excited about them. She developed a profound obsession with her newfound purpose and with Chad himself. Even after the gathering, Lori and Chad continued to exchange text messages and emails. In 2018, Chad emailed her a chart related to the categories of light and dark, and he went as far as grading her family based on the criteria he provided. Fast forward to 2019, and the Varlow marriage was in jeopardy as Lori immersed herself more deeply into the religion that was gradually evolving into a cult. She began to distance herself from everyday life. Lori strongly believed in the concept of light and dark people, often referring to the latter as zombies. She held on to the idea that she was an eternal being destined to lead the 144,000, a group believed to have special protection from God. As her beliefs intensified, conflicts between Lori and Charles escalated. On January 31st, Charles returned from a business trip to find that he couldn't contact his wife and children for the last 2 days. Upon arriving home, he discovered the locks had been changed, his clothes were in the trash, and his bank account had been drained of almost $35,000. Alarmed and with no other recourse, he called the police. When the officers arrived, Charles explained the situation, expressing his concern about not being able to reach his kids for 2 days. He revealed that Lori seemed to have lost touch with reality, believing herself to be a resurrected being and a god, focusing on the prophecy of the 144,000. Charles emphasized that she had taken all the money from their bank account and had even taken his truck from the airport. The situation had become a cause for immediate concern. Charles explained to the police that he had just flown in from Houston to Dallas, and a friend was trying to pick him up. He had gone to the community bridges or something to file a report, and they had ordered a pickup. When asked about what made Lori a danger to herself and others, Charles disclosed that Lori had threatened to murder him. Charles clarified that she had threatened him with murder, saying she didn't know who he was, and that she could use her powers to kill him. The police tried to understand the situation and asked if this was a recent development or if it had been ongoing. Charles revealed that it had been going on for about 4 or 5 years, escalating recently. Lori would go to the temple every day, claiming to speak with Moroni and Jesus Christ, who would guide her actions. In the last couple of days, Lori told Charles that he wasn't Charles, but someone named Nick Schneider. She claimed to have information from people in Utah who told her about her past lives, probation, and marriages to figures like Moroni and James the Just. Charles acknowledged that this information was foreign to him, and while he used LDS, Latter-day Saints terms, he recognized the craziness of the situation. Charles had previously informed the police about Lori's threats, but they were not taken seriously at that time. Lori would then disappear, remaining off the radar for a total of 58 days. During this period, Charles took action and filed for divorce. During the 58-day period when Lori disappeared, it was later revealed that she had flown to Hawaii with her daughter, Tylee. Even after their return, Lori kept her distance from the rest of the family. However, this was just the beginning of her disturbing behavior. On July 11, 2019, the police received a call from a man reporting that he had killed someone. The perpetrator was Alex Cox, Lori's older brother. In the call, Alex claimed that he had gotten into a fight with his brother-in-law, Charles Vallow, and had shot him in self-defense. The dispatcher asked for details, and Alex mentioned that Charles had come at him with a bat. When asked about Lori's whereabouts, Alex said he believed she was taking her son to school. The police instructed him to come out with his hands empty and walk outside. They confirmed the front door was unlocked and officers were on their way. This call marked a tragic turn of events, and it became clear that Lori's family was caught in a web of violence and disturbing incidents. A few minutes after the call, police arrived at Lori's new address, where she had moved just several days prior. At the time of the murder, Lori was taking JJ to school, and Alex and Tylee were inside the house. Charles seemingly arrived at the house and got into an argument with Lori's brother, Alex. During their exchange, Tylee fetched a baseball bat, and Charles took it out of her hand before hitting Alex in the back of the head. In response, Alex grabbed his gun and shot Charles multiple times in the chest. Charles died there in his living room, and his body was discovered by the police several minutes later. While one might expect shock or distress after such a violent incident, Lori displayed an eerie calmness. She acted as if nothing had happened and even laughed and made jokes during her police interrogation. However, the strangeness didn't end there. A few hours after Charles's death, Lori, in her own house, decided to host a pool party at the crime scene. This behavior raised eyebrows and added to the bizarre circumstances surrounding the incident. During Alex's police interrogation, officers noticed something suspicious in his statement. He claimed that Charles had hit him over the head with a baseball bat, but upon inspection, the injury appeared minor. Considering Charles was a semi-professional baseball player, he could have caused significant harm if he had wanted to. Alex's story was later questioned in court, but he was released without further investigation. The very next day after Charles's death, Nicholas and Zachary, Charles's sons, were informed of their father's passing. Lori chose to relay the news via text, deciding not to go through the trouble of making a phone call. Shortly after these events, Lori, along with JJ and Tylee, moved out of Arizona. Their destination, Rexburg, Idaho, where Chad Daybell lived. The family of three settled in the area, but the story took more unsettling turns. In early September, Lori enrolled JJ in school, but surprisingly, she did not enroll Tylee. On September 8, 2019, Lori took both kids to Yellowstone National Park, accompanied by her brother Alex. In pictures, they appeared happy, but this outing marked the last time Tylee would be seen. Oddly, Lori didn't report Tylee's disappearance to the police. Since Tylee had moved to another state a couple of weeks earlier, her absence went unnoticed. Meanwhile, JJ started school and seemed to adjust well. 2 weeks later, on September 17th, a neighbor's doorbell camera recorded footage of JJ playing with a friend in the neighborhood. Just like Tylee, this would be the last time JJ was seen by anyone. On September 23rd, Lori called JJ's school and unenrolled him from the program. When the principal questioned her decision, Lori simply stated that she would homeschool him herself, ending the discussion. The mysterious disappearances of Tylee and JJ raised concerns, but Lori's actions only added to the growing unease surrounding the family. JJ and Tylee were missing, and as the months passed, friends and family became increasingly concerned about their whereabouts. When asked about the children, Lori would assure people that they were doing fine and provide false locations, claiming they were at a friend's house or visiting relatives. During this period, two significant events occurred. On October 1, 2019, Lori rented a storage unit just outside Rexburg. Witnesses observed her storing the children's bikes, belongings, and blankets in the unit. The following day, she was seen at the storage facility again, this time in the company of Chad Daybell. Throughout the month, Chad, Lori, and her brother Alex visited the storage unit a total of 9 times. The second notable event took place on October 9th. Chad's wife, Tammy, was in her driveway unloading groceries when a masked man with a paintball gun approached her. The man began firing, and Tamara screamed for her husband. The assailant fled, and Tamara survived the attack. She shared the incident on Facebook. However, just 10 days later, on October 19th, Tamara was found dead in her bed. Chad Daybell called 911, reporting that he had discovered her lifeless. Detectives investigated the scene and initially concluded that Tamara's death was natural. When asked about an autopsy, Chad declined, raising suspicions surrounding the circumstances of Tamara's demise. Chad's refusal for an autopsy on Tamara's death left authorities with no choice but to accept his decision without further probing. Seemingly unaffected by his wife's death, Chad and Lori flew to Hawaii 2 weeks later, where they got married on the beach in all-white attire. The media and police couldn't ignore the peculiar chain of events and started keeping a close eye on the newlyweds. During and after their honeymoon, when questioned about their family and children, Chad and Lori began lying. Chad claimed Lori had never had any kids, while Lori stated that Tylee had died a few years back without providing any explanation. On November 26th, police decided to conduct a welfare check on JJ. They visited Lori's house and requested to see him, but Lori claimed he wasn't at home. She insisted that JJ was back in Arizona with her friend Melanie. The police quickly involved and cooperated with the Arizona Police Department. When confronted, Melanie expressed surprise, stating she hadn't seen JJ in weeks. However, her next statement raised alarms. Melanie revealed that before the authorities arrived, Lori and Chad had called her, asking her to lie and say that JJ was with her. The next day, armed with a search warrant, the police headed to Lori's house, but she and Chad were gone. The couple had returned to Hawaii. Between December 2019 and January 2020, the police officially declared JJ and Tylee missing. They raided Chad's house, seizing his computers, journals, and cell phones. Lori was notified that she needed to bring the children to the police station within 5 days, or she risked arrest. Amidst this investigation, on December 12th, Lori's brother Alex suddenly died. The cause was attributed to blood clots, and his death was ruled as resulting from natural causes. Lori, failing to bring the kids to the police station, was finally arrested on February 20th, 2020. Her bail was set at $5 million, and she was extradited to Rexburg, where she remained in custody. Despite Lori being behind bars, the authorities still didn't know the whereabouts of the missing children or what had happened to them. After 4 agonizing months, on June 9, 2020, Rexburg police arrived at Chad's door at 7 in the morning, armed with a search warrant for his 1960s home on 4 acres of land. Investigators spent a few hours at the property. Soon, they made a grim discovery: human remains buried next to Chad's red barn. Initially unidentified, a day later, it was confirmed that the remains belonged to JJ and Tylee through DNA testing. The long-awaited discovery brought devastating news to the families and friends who had hoped for a different outcome. JJ and Tylee were found, but unfortunately, their fate was not the one their loved ones wished for. In Rexburg, moments of shared grief and condolences unfolded on Wednesday as neighbors, community members, and the media expressed sympathy to the grandparents of JJ Varlow. The heartbreak of the situation resonated through the community, and people expressed their sorrow for the family's pain. Community member Janice Summers, who closely followed the case, captured a video of Kay and Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandparents, walking near the Daybell property where they believed the remains of their grandson and his sister Tylee were buried. The video captured the devastating impact of the situation on the family and the community. On the day of the discovery, Chad Daybell attempted to flee, but was quickly apprehended by police. After running just 1 mile from his property, he was tackled and arrested. Chad was charged with concealment and alteration of evidence. Both Lori and Chad remained in prison, with their trial set for 2023. The community and the affected families were left grappling with the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. After the disappearance of JJ and Tylee, witnesses reported that Lori began referring to her children as zombies. This disturbing terminology aligns with Lori's previous characterization of dark individuals as zombies. When Lucy Blackman, an English tourist, vanished from Tokyo. Her friends and family feared the worst. Little did they know, her disappearance would unveil the dark and hidden crimes of one of Japan's most notorious killers. In today's video, we'll delve into the chilling case of Joji Obara. Our story begins in the southeast of England, in the picturesque county of Kent. Kent, often referred to as the Garden of England, boasts a rich history and thriving service-based economy. While renowned for its historic cathedrals and castles, Kent is also gaining recognition for its vibrant food and wine scene. Nestled near the western border of Kent lies the quaint town of Sevenoaks, where Lucy Blackman called home. Born on September 1, 1978, Lucy was the eldest of 3 siblings, with younger sister Sophie and brother Rupert completing the family. Sadly, Lucy's childhood was marked by her parents' divorce, leading her, along with her mother, brother, and sister, to relocate within Kent. Lucy was known as a cheerful child, always brimming with energy and radiating positivity. Her meticulous planning skills shone through in her academic pursuits. After graduating from school, Lucy decided to pursue a career as a flight attendant with British Airways, enticed by the prospect of traveling the world. However, as the years passed, the constant travel and low pay took a toll on her, plunging her into financial strain and leaving her feeling drained. Like many young professionals navigating their first job, Lucy began to reassess her career path and overall direction. Despite her love for travel, the demanding nature of her role at British Airways took its toll on her finances and mental well-being. It was then that Lucy and her colleague Louise devised a plan. They realized that traveling didn't have to entail constant hopping from one country to another. They could settle in a foreign destination, secure stable employment, and improve their financial situation. Intrigued by Japan's unique culture and lifestyle, Lucy and Louise resolved to find work in the land of the rising sun to alleviate their debts. Japan, with its myriad UNESCO World Heritage Sites and deeply ingrained traditions, their decision to embark on this journey was daunting, but they drew strength from each other. They booked their tickets and embarked on their adventure to Japan. In May 2000, Lucy and Louise found themselves in the vibrant heart of Tokyo, settling into an apartment near Roppongi, renowned for its bustling nightlife and fusion of Western and Japanese cultures. They wasted no time in securing employment and soon landed jobs at a local nightclub called Casablanca, where they served as hostesses to its diverse clientele. In Japan, customs and social norms differ significantly from those in the Western world, and host and hostess clubs, known as kaipokura, epitomize this cultural distinction. Hostesses engage in activities such as lighting cigarettes, serving drinks, and engaging in conversation with patrons, creating a welcoming and entertaining atmosphere. While dancing and explicit behavior are prohibited, kaipokuras provide a space for patrons to unwind and socialize in a relaxed setting. In Roppongi, many establishments sought Western women to cater to their Japanese clientele, offering decent pay and requiring strong customer service skills. Lucy and Louise embraced the challenge, eager to immerse themselves in this unique cultural experience and improve their financial situation. As part of Casablanca Club's policies, all hostesses are encouraged to have dinner with their customers before escorting them to the club for their shift, a tradition known as a dohan in Japan. Lucy's parents expressed concern about her choice of employment, but she reassured them, emphasizing her confidence and awareness of her boundaries. She likened the job to being an air hostess on the ground. On the warm afternoon of July 1, 2000, Lucy donned her sandals and black dress as she prepared to leave. Spotting her friend Louise in the adjacent room, she informed her about her dohan with a customer from the Casablanca Club. She mentioned that he had offered her a new mobile phone in exchange, and the dinner would be brief at a restaurant near the beach. Understanding the situation, Louise advised Lucy not to be too late, as they had plans for the evening. Louise's boyfriend, Scott Fraser, was also nearby, and they were all anticipating the weekend ahead. Lucy kept in touch with Louise throughout the day, sending 3 messages. Her first, at 1:30 p.m., stated, "I am now with my lunch date." At 5 p.m., she messaged Louise again, saying, "I'm being taken to the sea." Finally, around 6:45 p.m., she sent her last message, "I'll be back in half an hour," which she also sent to Scott shortly after. However, by 8 p.m., Lucy had not returned home. As Tokyo transitioned into the night, Lucy's whereabouts remained unknown. Despite informing her friend and boyfriend of her return, she had disappeared without a trace. The situation was daunting. What do you do when your friend goes missing in a foreign city, especially one as vast and unfamiliar as Tokyo, with its population of 34.4 million people? Locating one person seemed nearly impossible, especially considering the language and cultural barriers. Louise reached out to local authorities, but initial responses seemed disinterested. Days passed with no sign of Lucy. None of her colleagues at the club had seen her, and attempts to contact her went unanswered. Then, on the evening of July 3rd, Louise received a call from a man with a thick Japanese accent. He spoke English slowly but clearly, informing her Lucy can't speak right now. She's okay but won't be returning home. She has joined a new cult and is safe, undergoing training in Hatton Chiba. Back in England, Lucy's mother, Jane, reacted swiftly and intensely upon learning of Lucy's disappearance. The news filled her with terror from the moment she heard her daughter was missing. The anonymous call only heightened her concerns, as Lucy's sudden disappearance was completely out of character. The very next morning, Lucy's sister, Sophie, and her ex-boyfriend, Jamie, boarded a flight to Tokyo. The challenge ahead of them was vast and daunting. Despite filing a missing persons report, the police showed little interest in Lucy's case. Working with authorities over the following days proved cumbersome and frustrating. They simply didn't seem to care. Despite Lucy being an adult, her silence could indicate a life-threatening situation. Time was of the essence, adding to the extreme anxiety felt by her family. Realizing they were getting nowhere with the local police, they turned to the media instead. They hoped that by bringing Lucy's case into the public, I would generate tips and push the police into action. Public appearances in front of the Japanese press yielded results. As Lucy's disappearance gained notoriety and attention, the Japanese public began to offer assistance, though many tips turned out to be dead ends. As the 2-week mark approached, anxiety and hope intensified. The English and Japanese media became fixated on the case, with even Prime Minister Tony Blair and Richard Branson making appeals. Meanwhile, Lucy's family decided to enlist the help of a private investigator from England who promptly flew to Tokyo. He began scouring the streets of Roppongi and Ginza, eventually reaching Club Casablanca. One of the Western hostesses at the club came forward, revealing that she had seen Lucy with another man before her disappearance. With assistance from contacts at Scotland Yard, the investigator created an artist's impression based on the description provided, resulting in a composite image. As Lucy's disappearance became widely known, several Western women eventually came forward, sharing troubling accounts of their encounters with a man resembling the one depicted in the composite image. As more stories emerged, a disturbing pattern emerged. The man would take the women out on do-hands, promising them money and gifts before bringing them back to his apartment, spiking their drinks and assaulting them. While the name of the perpetrator varied among victims, his physical description remained consistent. A middle-aged man with medium-length hair, handsome, charming, and affluent-looking. The accumulation of accounts coupled with the police sketch provided investigators with a solid lead to pursue. However, despite this promising development, no significant breakthroughs occurred. As weeks turned into months and Lucy's disappearance lingered, doubts arose about whether she would ever be found. Over time, public and media interest waned, diminishing the prospects of gathering crucial evidence. Surveillance footage was overwritten, fingerprints faded, and eyewitness recollections blurred. The chances of solving the case seemed increasingly slim with each passing day. In a significant development during the 4th month of the police investigation, officers finally made a breakthrough. As October approached, a key suspect emerged, Joji Obara. Although he frequented Casablanca Club, he used different aliases. Nonetheless, his description closely matched that provided by multiple victims. Born on August 10, 1952, Joji Obara hailed from a family rooted in hard work, which eventually translated into wealth. Joji's father was a Korean immigrant who arrived in Japan with little money but grand aspirations. His unwavering determination and strong work ethic propelled him to success. Starting as a scrap collector, he eventually amassed considerable wealth, establishing a business empire spanning taxi companies, pachinko parlors, and real estate ventures. Joji, along with his two brothers, inherited the reputation of being privileged rich kids. Shielded by his father's affluence, Joji was rewarded with a house when he enrolled in Takeo Senior High School in Kanagawa. Unfortunately, at the age of 17, his father sadly passed away, leaving Joji and his two brothers over 40 million yen in assets across Osaka and Tokyo, the equivalent to 25 million pounds, or $33 million. After graduating from Ko University with a degree in politics and law, he became a naturalized Japanese citizen, with his brothers moving on to become doctors. But progressing into his 30s, Joji found his everyday job to be tedious and boring. It was around this time, from 1986 to 1991, that Japan experienced an economic bubble, meaning that real estate and stock market prices began to rocket. Joji heavily invested in this, believing that prices would continue to indefinitely rise. But in the early months of 1992, this bubble burst, causing real estate prices to plunge and Japan's economy to stagnate. He lost the risk, and as a result, his firm collapsed, his fortune almost entirely gone. But he wasn't out of the fight yet. Instead, he began to use his company as a money laundering front for the Yakuza, also known as the Japanese Mafia. So, as soon as Joji was recognized as the man in the police sketch, officers began to build a case around him and, of course, keep him under close observation. And finally, in early October, he was officially arrested and charged on 5 counts of indecent assault, therefore allowing officers to raid and investigate his property. Clues. What they found inside was devastating. He had a large library full of videos of himself taking advantage of his drug victims, with some of these crimes dating back all the way to the early 90s. He had been committing these awful acts of violence for almost an entire decade. Despite police findings and victim accusations, Joji denied all acts of violence and also denied ever meeting Lucy. This is on the contrary to multiple reports placing him in the same bar as her only days prior to her disappearance. With Joji behind bars, but his evidence mostly circumstantial, Lucy's family needed more information to feel comfortable that he was Lucy's suspect. Off the back of this, an international appeal was launched to ask anyone who may have had experience with Joji Ibarra to come forward. 8 years earlier, in February of 1992, he was in love with a woman named Kurita Ridgway. In fact, they were engaged, looking forward to spending the rest of their lives together. But things didn't quite turn out that way. Kurita was an aspiring actress, but with her dream of making it big, she needed money to attend acting school. Kurita decided to pay for tuition by becoming a hostess in Tokyo's Kabukiras, and as part of this agreement, she would go on dohans. On February 27, 1992, Kurita attended a dohan with a rich Japanese man. But after this date, she was dropped off unconscious. Kurita was rushed to the hospital, in which doctors did the very best they could to save her. But tragically, 2 days later, she died of liver failure. The cause of her death was officially deemed to be hepatitis E or natural causes. She had no concerning medical history, and she was always clean. The boyfriend contacted Japanese authorities, who, in return, reopened Kurita's case with a sharp focus to link her with Joji Ibarra, and the conclusion they were looking for came very quickly. Amongst the 400 videotapes found in Joji's home was one named Kurita Ridgway, and in his diary on February 27, 1992, he had written Kurita Ridgway, too much chloroform. As tragic as this development was, this information was all that police needed to upgrade Joji's charges from assault to murder. And although this fresh evidence was successful in strengthening his role in Lucy's disappearance, it sadly didn't confirm it. But then, in January of 2001, 6 months after Lucy had vanished, a very sad and solemn discovery was made. On January 10, 2001, investigations led police to a cave off the shores of Mira in Kanagawa, and this cave was only 100 meters away from Joji's apartment. While here, they noticed uneven concrete underneath the basin of a bathtub. Rather puzzled, they began to remove the concrete, and what they found underneath were a series of packages. They slowly opened these packages up, and tragically, Inside each of them were dismembered body parts, with even the head entombed in concrete. When postmortem examiners cut into the cement, they hoped to find teeth to match with dental records, but instead, they immediately found one identifiable feature. It was long, natural blonde hair. As you can probably guess, the body was later confirmed to belong to Lucy Blackman. Lucy's family was devastated. The long spell of silence from their daughter already painted a very grave reality for her, but they always held on to the hope that maybe one day she would return, and this discovery would put an end to their hopes. The discovery of Lucy's body would ignite a very long, exhausting legal battle between Joji Ibarra, and not just the family of Lucy and Carita, but the family of many other victims too. Joji had now been charged with 9 counts of indecent assault, the murder of Carita Ridgway, and now the murder of Lucy Blackman, but he would still deny having anything to do with Lucy's death, and this was despite her body being found not even 2 minutes from his apartment. Joji admitted that he'd spent the evening with her, but insisted that shortly after 5 p.m. she had left the apartment. Apparently, she was high, and therefore he asked her to leave. The entire trial would last almost 7 long years, which was full of disappointing spectacles by Joji. In one of his days in court, he refused to leave his jail cell, and instead he stripped naked, held onto his toilet basin, and repeatedly screamed no. There is some extremely frustrating evidence coming up, but before that, I wanted to share with you that Joji was found not guilty of the murder of Lucy Blackman, which makes the following details all the more enraging. Through the multitudes of analysis, investigators were able to confirm the following. At around 4 p.m. on July 1, 2000, Lucy met up with Joji. An hour later, she rang Louise to say that they were on their way to the coast. Mobile phone data confirms this. At 5:30 p.m., a Japanese couple saw Joji and Louise together at a seaside resort, and a photo from a camera from Joji's flat confirms that they were on the beach shortly after. Blonde hairs belonging to Lucy were found in his flat, and this was confirmed by DNA analysis. Mobile phone records confirmed that Lucy made a final call in the evening while in his home. This was confirmed by triangulating her mobile phone's coordinates. Copies of a forged signature were found in his apartment, proving that he was the fraudster who'd pretended to be her through a letter. We don't quite know what happened later this evening, but the very next day, on July 2nd, phone records show that Joji had called several hospitals in his area, asking how to treat someone who's experienced a drug overdose. The very next day, on July 3rd, receipts confirmed that Joji purchased a chainsaw, cement mix, and other tools from a hardware store. And later that afternoon, police were called by Joji's neighbor, who'd complained about suspicious activity and noise, as apparently they had heard Terrified shouting the day prior. It gets even more suspicious. Police reports indicate that late that afternoon, officers arrived at Joji's apartment to request that they look around. Upon entering, they found that he had cement mix on his hands, and he was visibly shaken. When police requested to look in his bathroom, he became aggressive and refused to let them in. Instead exclaiming that they'd already seen enough, the police left without pressing this issue any further. Neighbors reported that later in the evening on the same day, they witnessed Joji pacing the small beach next to his apartment several times, and hospital records show that he was treated for extensive bug bites the next day, as a result for being outside all night. However, despite the text messages, phone calls, witness reports, police reports, forged signature, mobile phone data, DNA, previous cases, and bug bites, he was still found innocent over Lucy's murder. He was found guilty on 9 counts of indecent assault and the murder of Carita Ridgway, therefore sentencing him to life. But really, the reason for this is the prosecutor couldn't find any of his DNA on her body, and also they couldn't determine the cause of her death, so technically he was dismissed. And thankfully, 1 year later after being appealed, Joji was retrialed on the murder of Lucy Blackman, where he was finally found guilty. But seriously, this should have happened the first time around. At least to me. But this case highlights the show incompetence of Japan's former police force. I know in recent years, they've reformed to become more compassionate and responsive, but back then they really didn't care about their tourists. A few side notes from this case. While Joji was under trial and not yet found guilty, he offered Lucy's mother condolence money, formally requesting her to stop the trial, for £450,000. Understandably, she refused, but only days later her ex-husband, which is Lucy's father, took the money instead. Obviously, this caused a massive rift in the family, and I'll let you be the judge on how moral this was to his own daughter. Joji's case is unique. He truly is a deviant and a monster to the highest degree. He assaulted not one, but hundreds of women, and technically became a killer through his own ventures. And despite over 99% of Japan's murderers confessing once caught, he remains as part of the 1% who refuses to accept responsibility and blame. Joji Ibarra is a chronic liar who denies any accountability, and obviously, he is used to getting everything he desires. Who knows how many more women he would have terrorized if it wasn't for the tenacity and strong will of Lucy's family in France, all of which even 22 years later continue to live their lives with a hole in their heart. And so concludes the case of Joji Ibarra, Lucy Blackman, and Carita Ridgway. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope the stories gave you something to think about, or dream about. Sleep well, stay safe, and don't forget to subscribe. Good night.